secret you keep, the one even you don't understand. This volume holds its true name. Welcome to LibCurio, Library of Curiosity. Shush, please keep silent. And now the next chapter begins.
The air feels thick, but invisible, like breathing underwater without knowing you've drowned. You awaken in a room you've never entered, but somehow remember, where shadows curve and fold around a silence so deep it hums. A faint crack fractures the ceiling's calm, dripping slow like forgotten time. You reach out, but your fingers grasp only the empty, an unseen wall or the edge of yourself, and the question lingers, heavy and quiet. What if this box is all you ever knew? And what if you can never prove you're outside it? You walk through your days believing the walls around you are real, solid, unyielding, built by the world outside. But what if the cage isn't out there at all? What if it's the architecture of your mind, invisible to your senses, but no less binding? You think you are free, yet every thought, every choice may already be shaped by unseen bars, habits, memories, fears that you never questioned. The samurai faced death each morning, not to escape life, but to understand its fragile limits. Stoics whispered that the only true freedom was to accept what cannot be changed. And ancient sages taught that the self you cling to is not a solid thing, but a flicker, a shadow you mistake for light. Is the life you live your own, or just a story learned so well you forget the author? Can you prove you aren't trapped inside a box so subtle that even your senses deceive you? Or is freedom a quiet place inside the walls, a space where the watcher meets the watched, and the self you thought real dissolves into something strange, beautiful, and unknown? What if the boundaries you fear don't cage you, but teach you how to see? There was once a traveler, a wanderer of shadowed lands and forgotten dreams, who found himself trapped inside a box with no doors. It was not a box of wood or iron, but one woven from silence and absence, edges so faint they almost dissolved into the darkness beyond. The air inside was heavy with stillness, thick like fog curling around his skin, carrying a scent of damp earth and distant rain. He could hear the faint tick of an unseen clock, each second folding back into the last, time bending like a river forced into a narrow channel. At first, panic gripped him, a primal scream lost in the void. He struck the walls, hard and furious, each blow swallowed by the endless quiet. But the box remained unyielding and invisible, its boundaries more felt than seen. He sat, breath shallow, heart hammering against ribs like a trapped bird. In the vast nothingness, memories flickered, faces blurred, places half remembered, voices long silenced. Was this prison real or a dream spun by his own mind? He recalled the words of an old master who had taught him, "To die before you die is to awaken to the true nature of the self, not a death of flesh, but a shedding of illusion." Slowly, the traveler closed his eyes, surrendering to the stillness. The walls softened, no longer barriers but teachers cloaked in shadow. The ticking clock became a heartbeat, steady and sure, guiding him inward. In that quiet descent, he glimpsed a fractured mirror, its surface cracked by unseen hands. Each shard reflected a fragment of his being, a child afraid to speak, a lover lost in longing, a warrior burdened by fear. He touched the shards gently, feeling the jagged edges bite into his skin, yet somehow healing him. The self he had fought to protect was breaking apart, shattered into light and shadow. The traveler realized the box was not a trap but a crucible. It forced him to confront the fractured pieces of identity he had stitched together like a patchwork cloak. The boundaries he feared were born of his own making, thoughts and fears shaped by years of stories told by others, voices inside his head that demanded control. The box held no prisoners but invited a witness. Outside, he imagined the world continuing, storms raging, rivers flowing, time unspooling like thread. Inside, the traveler breathed deeper, learning to rest in the silence between moments, in the gap between heartbeats. The box dissolved not with a crash, but with a soft sigh of understanding. Freedom was not beyond the walls, but within the space they enclosed. In another time, another life, a philosopher sat by a dimly lit lamp, tracing the cracks in a mirror that seemed to hold infinity itself. He whispered to the darkness, "You are not the actor, but the witness. The self you hold is smoke, a flicker caught in the wind." The mirror shattered silently, each fragment a star in the vast night sky. The traveler smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet surrender. Death was no longer an enemy, but a companion, the breath beneath his ribs, fierce and tender. The box was a metaphor for existence itself, the fragile boundary between life and death, between knowing and unknowing, between self and other. Beneath the surface of your consciousness, an unseen orchestra plays neurons, firing long before your mind claims the reins. Benjamin Libet's experiments revealed this haunting truth. Your brain prepares actions before you become aware of deciding them. The hand moves silently in the shadows of your awareness, a ghost before the ghost's name. What then is the self that believes it commands? Stoicism offers a quiet refuge here, a call to become the impartial witness, the observer of thoughts and impulses without clinging or aversion. Marcus Aurelius wrote of standing firm amidst the chaos of life, observing the passing storms of emotion and desire without losing presence. The self, he suggested, is not a fortress, but a flickering flame vulnerable to the wind, yet capable of serene endurance. The samurai embraced a similar truth. Bushido was not merely a code of honor, but a daily rehearsal with death. To die before you die was to dissolve the ego's tight grasp on identity, allowing one to face life unshackled by fear. The box, in this light, becomes a symbol not of confinement, but of boundary, the line where life and death, control and surrender meet. Eastern philosophy deepens this paradox. The Buddhist concept of anattana self teaches that what you call I is a mirage woven from transient sensations, thoughts, and memories. The self is not a fixed entity, but a river in constant flow. Attempting to hold it is like trying to grasp smoke. The invisible box is thus both prison and lens. It reveals the limits of perception while inviting transcendence. This boundary, mental, existential, is inevitable. You cannot escape the limits of your body, your mind, or time itself. Yet awareness of these limits is freedom's beginning. The box's walls exist only in the stories you tell yourself about control and separation. When you pause between thought and action, when you witness without judgment, you touch a space beyond the box. This space is paradoxical, both empty and full, confined and infinite. It is the silence between the ticking clock's beats, the breath before the next moment. It is not freedom from the box, but freedom within it. The box is your life shaped by fear, memory, and desire. Yes, but also the container for your awakening. To live fully is to inhabit this paradox, embracing the fragility of self without losing sight of the vastness beyond. The box no longer feels like a prison. Its walls pulse softly now, not barriers, but the quiet rhythm of your own breath. You sit in the stillness, watching shadows play along edges you once feared. The ticking clock has softened, a heartbeat beneath the silence, and you begin to see the cracks not as fractures, but as fragile gateways, thin veins of light spilling into the darkness. Death is no longer a specter lurking just beyond, but the breath beneath your ribs, steady and sure, a fierce and tender companion walking beside you. You realize the freedom you sought was never outside, never in the breaking or the escaping, but in the gentle acceptance of the space you occupy. Maybe the lie was never outside you, but in believing the voice that demanded proof of escape, that told you the self must be whole and unbroken to be free. You are not the box, nor the shadows it casts. You are the watcher, the silent breath, the vastness that holds both walls and emptiness alike. And in that knowing, the walls dissolve not with a crash, but with the soft sigh of truth finally seen. What if the walls you sense are only the shadows of your own making? What if freedom isn't a place outside, but a presence inside, a quiet space you've never learned to inhabit? If the self is not a solid fortress, but a flickering flame, how do you hold on to anything at all? Can you prove you're outside the box? Or is the question itself a trap or riddle spun by the mind that fears its own silence? What if every choice you believe you've made was already written in the unseen currents beneath thought? And what if that realization isn't despair, but an invitation? An invitation to surrender the illusion of control, to become the watcher who sees the box and the prisoner as one, to breathe into the cracks and find the light there. If your memories are fragments of stories you never chose, and your identity a mask worn in a play you didn't write, then who is left when the mask falls away? Is it emptiness? Or something more vast and infinite space beyond time and self? You are both lost and found, confined and boundless, caught in the paradox that is existence itself. And maybe, just maybe, the box is not your prison, but the place where your true freedom begins.
Until next time, stay curious, stay unsettled. Remember that freedom isn't a distant place you reach or a chain you break, but the quiet witness within the shadows you once called walls. In the stillness, the true self begins to breathe. LibCurio never closes, and the next chapter awaits, patiently waiting to unfold in the silence.